All right, so what we're talking about today is what is called the power pyramid. And it really compares uh, or looks at who has the power within the colonies, so as far as the governmental powers. So we got to step back to, once again, the 1700s and think about who has the most power. All right, there's a couple things to think about when you're looking at a pyramid. You notice that over here it says the least amount of people. Well, the least amount of people have the most power. And then we get down here to most people, well, they have the least amount of power. So while I'm going over this, I do want you to make sure that you have your power pyramid opened up and you're going to write some information on it as well. You're also going to need to have out your vocabulary doc because we're going to add three vocabulary words to your list, at least the definitions of them. So let's start off. The one who has the most power, let's think about it. Think to yourself right now, who has the most power but is just very few people? Well, that would be what we call the king or the monarchy. Some points it's the queen also. Well, the king has the most power because if you go back to medieval times, the king owned all the land. And since he owned all the land, he makes all the policies. He gets to decide all the issues and what's going to happen in his realm. All right, so the king's got the most power. And that is true for the colonies. The king had the most say of what was going on in the colonies. Our next part would be what we call the British Parliament. So I'm going to write down Parliament here. You should be writing this down on your own Google Draw, I guess, is what I have for you. The Parliament is made up of representatives from England. But I will tell you this: when Parliament was first designed, they were really a lawmaking body, but they advised the king. Now, as England continues to expand and get older in their type of government, this continues to change. All right. So eventually, the Parliament starts making some decisions on their own. But at this point in history, King still has the most power, and the Parliament is right below that. Our next group is someone that's actually going to be inside of the colonies itself, because these people aren't there, and that would be the colonial governors. Most of the colonial governors were handpicked by none other than the king. All right, so really, these guys are still following the laws of the king. Most of them. There's a few of them that were elected by their own colonial legislatures or the representatives, but most of these guys they're still answering to the king. So yes, they do have lots of power in the colonies, but they cannot do anything that goes against what Parliament says, and they can't do anything that goes against what the king says. Our next one, getting down here to not as much power now, we have what we call the colonial assemblies. All right, the colonial assemblies are the legislative bodies of the colonies. They're elected by their people or appointed by the colonies. All right, so this is a lot different because now instead of having the king in charge and picking out the people, now we have the colonists actually deciding who's going to be in their assemblies. A great example of this would be in the colony of Virginia. They have what we call a bicameral legislature. So they had two lawmaking bodies. One was called the Council of State, and the other was called the Virginia House of Burgesses. Now, bicameral legislature is a vocabulary word. So let's go to your vocabulary doc. And we're going to write this definition I'm going to put on the board for bicameral legislature. It is a law making body made up of two houses. I mean, think about the prefix bi and bicameral. What does bi mean? Well, it means two. All right, so if we have bicameral, we're talking about two houses of the government. Our government today has two houses. We have the House of Representatives and we have the Senate. they make up our Congress. So we have a bicameral legislature. Virginia, all right, the colony of Virginia, down in their assemblies, they also had a bicameral legislature. Our very lowest, the people with the least amount of say, but they're still part of the government, is what we call town meetings. Town meetings are, most of the times, they were the men of the community. They would get together and they would decide and discuss local issues and policies. But once again, those issues cannot conflict with anything decided by any of these people. So it's really just local stuff. Like, what are we going to do with our schools? All right, how about our roads? Are there anything we can do with our roads? Those would be local issues they're going to look at. Now, town meetings, once again, that is a vocabulary word. So let's go back to your vocabulary doc, and we're going to write up this definition. Town meetings is a place where people talk about and decided on local issues. Once again, that is town meetings. So you can kind of see what happens here, right? King's got the most power, but he's only one person. That's the monarchy. Right? He controls everything else, and then you slowly start getting more and more people involved, but they don't really have much say in the government. That's the power pyramid. Now, this was all true until an event called the Glorious Revolution happened in England. And so here's what happened in the Glorious Revolution. Parliament, all right, these guys, they decided, you know what, the king's got a lot of power for one person, and he really shouldn't have that much power. So we need to do something about this. So they went to the king's daughter. So this is King James I. They went to his daughter. Her name was Mary. She was actually had previously been married to the monarchy of the Netherlands. His name was William of Orange. All right, so we got William of Orange and Mary, and they asked him, you know what, William and Mary, will you come over to England and overthrow your father? That's what they asked him to do. Overthrow your father, kick him out. And if you do, we will let you be our monarchy, except that some of your power is going to come to us, the Parliament. Now, William of Netherlands is thinking, wow, this is a great idea, right? Because, I mean, I got some power in Netherlands, but being the king of England, that would be great. That's a lot of power, even if something's taken away from me. So William and Mary agree to it. They go over to England. They overthrow the king, her father, kick him out, and now William and Mary are in control. That takes these two positions and puts them on a little bit more equal footing. They both have power. All right, so once again, that's the Glorious Revolution. After the Glorious Revolution, Parliament comes up with a new law. It's called the English Bill of Rights, which is the vocabulary word. So let's go to your vocabulary words. Once again, that's the English Bill of Rights. So if you make your way there, we'll do our last definition. This one took power from the monarchy and gave it to Parliament. Once again, that's took power from the monarchy and we gave that power to Parliament. So now they both have shared power in the government. All right, so once again, that is the power pyramid. It gives you a good idea of what's going on within the colonies. Colonies have very little say of what is happening on their own land. All of it's being decided by the king and now Parliament as well.